This podcast is being sponsored by the Rise Up Project.
Trust the process. Pain is power. All great things take time. I am unbreakable. Unbreakable.
What I want to know is, okay, so you went from military, corporate finance, law, real estate, to experiencing your aha moment, to launching a podcast every single day for 5.5 years. You've been able to reap your harvest to now being recognized as an award-winning podcast. And you've also been able to monetize it to 9 revenue streams. We all want to know, what is your secret?
Well, first off, thank you for the kind words. Much appreciated. It's a pleasure to join you today. Love the energy, love the vibe. And if I had to just share my one overriding secret, it would honestly be focus. I have this uncanny ability to follow one course until success. Focus. And that's unfortunately one of the biggest struggles I see most people in this industry now that do struggle. They struggle with focus. They're trying 5 different things at this exact same time. They're going 1 mile wide, but only 1 inch deep with all these different ideas, instead of just going 1 inch wide and 1 mile deep and really focusing and becoming the best at that one thing. Like, I wanted to become the best daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs. So guess what? I launched a daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs, and I did nothing else but eat, live, and breathe that. That was my only focus.
So when you went all in, were you still working corporate, or you literally left it and you decided, you know what, I got to learn how to be the best podcast host I can possibly be?
I burned the bridges. I quit my job, handed in my resignation, hired a mentor, and I said, let's do this. I have, about a year to 18 months of runway financially. Like, I am going to be eating ramen noodles for the foreseeable future. Let's do this.
So you've been known to interview some of the greatest minds in the world. Gary Vee, Tony Robbins, just to name a few, right? What has been your strategy when it comes to reaching out to high influencers? If you compare it from when you first started 6 months ago to where you are today, what has changed?
So there's a lot of things that have changed overall in the podcasting industry, but there's also been a lot this change overall with the influencers and the authority figures over the years. I mean, the reality is you only had a handful of real big authority figures, of really big influencers back in 2012, 2013, 2014. But, with the rise of everything that's happened over the last 5, 6, 7 years, with Instagram exploding, with TikTok exploding, with YouTube exploding, like all these different areas, you just have so many more influencers, so many more authority figures over these years. And so now you just have to really just be saying to yourself, what lane do I want to be in? For me, the lane is podcasting, and it will be for the foreseeable future. Like, I love this medium. I get it. I love it. I understand it. To me, there's always going to be a space in people's lives for when they want to just consume audio, when they're driving in their car to work, when they're at the gym, when they're going for a walk with their dog. Like, there's times that people love just having a little earbud in and just hearing a podcast and kind of being able to zone out, enjoy that content, but not go overboard. So, things have changed over the years. For me, in my opinion, things have changed a lot for the better. Just a lot more opportunity, a lot more inspiration, a lot more motivation out there. If people are willing to pick their lane, get very focused, very specific, and niche. And what I mean by that is creating one solution for one real problem. If you're able and willing to do that, then you're going to be able to build something worth building.
I love that. So I was able to relate to you when it comes to transitioning out of my corporate job, especially right now with the COVID times. Like, unfortunately, it's a blessing in disguise. Like, I'm on furlough, right? And I've been at my corporate for 9+ years, but I found myself more unfulfilled than ever. And when you posted your video, like when you first about driving in the car, you know, how you left the military, that literally struck a chord in my heart. And it's one of those things where that's what really inspired me to start the Unbreakables podcast. But what I find is today, my biggest struggle is being vulnerable. And when it comes to like maybe doing a story online, right? And I know you talk about your first episode, maybe your first 100 episodes weren't that great. You were nervous, you had the paper shaking in your hand, and you weren't as confident, right? So what are some tools and what strategies or steps did you take to improve your skill set as well as your confidence?
So the thing that just continues to surprise me is that people really believe that they're going to be good at something when they first start it. Like, look back over your life. Was the first time you tried to crawl a success? The first time you tried to take a step or say a word? Like, when have we ever done anything well the first, second, fifth time we've done it? Like, it takes time. So you've got to put in the reps. And that's exactly why I went and did a daily podcast, because I said, you know what? I see all these people, they're good. They're doing 4 episodes per month. I'm never going to get good at something doing it 4 times a month. Who in their right mind, you know, practices basketball 4 days per month and thinks they're going to make the NBA? Nobody. It's putting in the reps. Like, I love watching the CrossFit games. You think those people train 4 days per month? No, they train 365 days per year. They put in the reps. I put in the reps. I did 2,000 episodes in 2,000 days. Every day I was putting in the reps. That's the only way you're going to get good at something. So my advice is always find something that you're excited about, that you're curious about, that you think is worth being good at, and then just go all in. Back to what I first started with, focus, follow one course until success, put in those reps.
During that time when you were putting out all those episodes, did you ever come to a point when you felt like you had a dead end, or you felt like you wanted to throw in the towel, or maybe you just felt like nobody was listening? And at what point did you realize, you know, I have something, I have to keep going?
So when I launched the podcast, you know, I had a pretty decent momentum off the start. And the reason I attribute that is because I was the best daily podcast that interviewed entrepreneurs from day one. I was also the worst. I was the only daily podcast. I was the only show in town. If you wanted to listen to a daily podcast interviewing entrepreneurs, there was no other option. Like, I was it. I was the guy. So guess what? That gave me some early initial momentum. But despite that, listen, life is 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. And like, that's been my journey as well. Like, there's been no straight line of success. There's been no hockey stick. Like, it's just been like going like this, up and down. Luckily, over time, it's trending up and to the right, but not in a straight line, in a very zigzag up and down way. So there were plenty of times when I doubted myself. There were plenty of times when a sponsor would call and cancel, and I was like, okay, this is it. They're all going to call me now and cancel. Like, it's just not going to work. Like, all of those times and all of those experiences are going to happen to us along the way. And guess what? That's when most people quit. That's when most people stop, when it gets difficult. There's a reason why there's a saying, there's no traffic along the extra mile, because nobody's on that extra mile. Everybody's given up by then. But if you just keep this phrase in mind, that the higher the barrier, the lower the competition. Every time something feels tough, instead of being like, oh, this is tough, be like, good, this is tough. Because now thousands of people who otherwise would be my competition, they're quitting right now because it's tough. Like, when I was in the Army and I would do an obstacle course and I would come up to the hardest obstacle, I would be like, this is awesome, because so many people are quitting at this obstacle right now.
And you're
so
overcoming it.
I know it sucks, but I'm going to overcome it. And when I get over to the other side, my competition is way lower because most people can't hack it.
I love that. So what is your approach when it comes to, maybe like for our podcasters that are listening, including myself, within their first year, what has been your approach to reaching out to maybe sponsors or being able to monetize or maybe affiliate marketing?
So for the first year, I don't even think 99% of podcasts should go after sponsors. It's just not the right move for the first year, because you're not going to have a big enough listener base to make it make sense. Sponsors are paying an average of $25 per 1,000 listens. If you have 1,000 listens per episode, you have one of the bigger shows out there. You are 7.5 times the average show at 1,000 listens. And guess what? That's $25. Like, that's not game-changing money for an episode. And then what are you doing with those sponsors? You're sending your listeners away to their products, to their services. For that first year, flip the script and just say, hey, what are my audience's biggest struggles? What are their biggest challenges? Why don't I create the solution for them? Why don't I keep them in my sphere, in my influence, and I'll create a product or a service, or I'll found a community, and then I'll bring people into that, and they'll pay me directly, and they'll invest in me directly. That's a much better bang for your buck.
But at what point did you realize that you had an offer, or you had an idea and you had the opportunity to create an offer? Because I know they say you have to have an audience first, right? And then you have an offer. But at what point did you feel, you know what, I'm good enough, I'm ready, I've already done all the reporting, now I can teach it?
You never feel good enough. You always have doubts. You always have fears. The imposter syndrome is always there. So just realize there's never going to be a time that you feel like you're ready. You're just going to have to go and take that leap of faith. And for me, my first leap of faith was a failure. I created, a product that did not work. So then I went back to my audience and I said, listen, what do you guys need? Like, you obviously didn't want this. What is it that you want? What is it that you need? And I got better feedback the next time. I got more knowledge, more information, and I learned from my previous failure and my previous mistakes, and I applied it to this next thing, and that worked. That was Podcaster's Paradise. That was what took off and started bringing in significant revenue. And so it takes a couple trials and errors. It takes a couple swings and misses. But the key is, you're never going to feel ready. You're never going to feel like you're like enough, but you just got to break through that, launch it, and then learn from the successes and the failures.
And be consistent, right? Have a relentless willpower. So knowing what you know now, who would you choose to be mentored by and why? Especially in the space of entrepreneurship, podcasting, monetization.
So what's so key when it comes to mentors for any individual is to have this one phrase in mind. Who is currently where I want to be? That's the individual you want to be your mentor. So for me, back in 2012, I wanted to be a successful business podcast host. So I went and hired a successful business podcast host. Right now, in 2020, I just signed a major deal with HarperCollins. I'm writing my first traditionally published book.
Congratulations. That's a huge milestone.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited, but I don't really know what the heck I'm doing. So what am I doing now? At this stage in my life, I am looking for a successful business author, and that person's my mentor. And so I'm having great conversations with people who I look up to and admire in this space, who are mentoring me in this specific area. So your needs for mentors are going to change over time. But if you say to yourself, who is currently where I want to be? And then go find that. And I like to say in 1 year's time, like, who's somebody that's like a year ahead of me? Mm-hmm. Like, who's somebody who has been running a successful business podcast for about a year or two?
That's
like,
definitely
that was a sweet spot,
right?
And it's super attainable because they're just right over the horizon, but they've learned so much. They've, had the experience. They know the shortcuts to take. They know the obstacles and potholes to avoid. That's the key.
Now, one last question in regards to mentorship. Did you ever feel like you didn't want to be a burden? Because I feel sometimes that's my issue, where I don't want to, hey, can you mentor me? I want to learn from you. And I guess that's a part of being vulnerable, right? Being open, saying, I need help. And oftentimes people don't like asking for help. So how did you?
You've got to ask for help. You have to be vulnerable. You have to ask for help. You just have to put it out there. And guess what? I had to invest. Like, my mentor, as much as I would have loved her to, mentor me for free, she wasn't going to do that because, her time was valuable. So I had to invest in mentorship. And some people are going to have to do that if you find the right person. But you might find other situations where people are willing to mentor for a certain amount of time per week or month for free. So you've got to kind of like find who that right person is and then go forward from there. but realize that, at some stage in the game, you've got to invest in yourself.
I appreciate you, John. I appreciate all the time too. So what is next? And if you can also tell our audience where they can contact you and where they can get a hold of you.
Yeah, all our magic happens at EOFIRE.com. That's our website. We have a ton of free courses for people that want to start a podcast, have their big idea, create a funnel that converts. So I love giving free value to people. So check it out at EOFIRE.com. You can watch that video that Jay mentioned, about the fact that I was, in a suit, in a tie, going in my drudgery to work and just feeling like, I didn't belong. So it is a pretty cool video. And also on that same page is when I won a car on The Price is Right, which is pretty fun. Yeah, so keep scrolling down. And of course, my podcast is Entrepreneurs on Fire. I would love if you checked it out. And it was great hanging out with you today.
One day, I'm going to get you in person. We're going to do a part 2. I'm putting it out.
We'll do it. It'll happen. Take care.
Have a good one.